Hello. In this fourth and final talk, I want to complete the atheist's story of the creation of the living world by looking at the origin of life. Now, there are many different theories suggesting what could have caused something, somewhere, somehow, to come alive. But despite the fact that hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent researching this issue, essentially scientists don't have a clue. Dr. Paul Davies, who did extensive research in this field, wrote that one of the reasons that the fact that they are so far from finding a solution is not publicly acknowledged is the fear that that could undermine funding. Now, what I want to convey to you is just how certain we can be that they will never find a naturalistic, atheistic explanation for the origin of life. Because what essentially had to happen? Molecules that from the outset contained the ability to replicate themselves had to come alive, get their act together, and form the first simple, mobile, self-sufficient, self-replicating cell. The experts say that the simplest cell that can be imagined must have contained some 250 proteins in order to be functional. It has been calculated that the chances of all the amino acids required to produce just one protein assembling by chance in the correct sequence is not 1 in a trillion or a trillion, but it's a number equivalent to the number of seconds in billions and billions of years. In cells that we are familiar with, it's the information in the DNA that is required to produce proteins. However, many proteins are required to produce DNA. So what came first? In addition, there must have been from the outset a mechanism, a machine that folds up the protein into the precise shape and size required in order for it to be able to go off and perform its specific task. Some scientists suggest that there was a precursor to DNA, a simpler system. But how did this simpler system develop into DNA? Did genetic variations produce the mind-boggling complexity of genetics? And what is the source of genetic information? A language of instructions that exists within our genes. We're talking about a vast amount of coded information in each and every cell. It's been estimated that if all the genetic information in just one cell was transcribed into books, it would fill 1,000 books, each book containing 600 pages. Now, the genetic information by itself is totally useless. There must have been from the outset a mechanism for retrieving the specific information required in order to produce each and every protein. It's like you come into this big library and in a second you take out the exact book you require and open it up at the right page. Then there must be a mechanism for translating, for decoding the information. Only then can the process of producing the protein actually commence. Do you know there are in our genes repair mechanisms and proofreaders? How would an evolutionist explain this? Did genetic mutations produce mechanisms for preventing and repairing genetic mutations? Richard Dawkins would say it doesn't matter if we don't understand. To say that God did it would be a cowardly evasion of scientific responsibility. What's cowardly? If I see a watch, I know there was a watchmaker. I'm not an idiot. They say that at first there were simple cells, but how did these simple cells develop into cells that we are familiar with, containing marvels of miniature technology, machines, power producers, robots that are carrying molecules around the cell? And how could a naturalistic, atheistic explanation of life explain the amazing coordination between the vast number of components within the cell? The answer to all the questions I've raised in these talks can only be one. God created life, God created the living world, and God created us, the pinnacle of His creation. Now, the irrefutable fact of God's existence does not automatically have any spiritual or religious ramifications, and it's beyond the scope of these talks to address such burning issues as, did God create us, as it were, just for the fun of it, or is there some deeper purpose and meaning to our lives? And if there is some ultimate spiritual and religious truth, can its authenticity in any way be verified, or is all religion, just like atheism, entirely a matter of faith? However, just one afterthought for those of you who may have been influenced by the teachings of the zealous, wise men of New Atheism. Since their whole atheistic philosophy is based not on science, but at best on second-rate science fiction coupled with a fanatic faith in randomness, how can they be granted the slightest credibility when they are talking about theology, the Hebrew Bible, spirituality? That's all for now. Thank you and Shalom.